Now let's discuss connective tissues. Connective tissues, we have quite a few varieties of connective tissues, and they have a lot of different functions. One of the overall functions is to bind and support. So we're going to hold your body together. We're going to connect your body to itself. We have some of these that are good for protection. We have some of them that are good for insulation, keeping your body warm, and then we have some that are even good for transportation. And so these are quite a bit different from each other, unlike epithelial tissue. So there we go. So collectively, your connective tissues are going to consist of 3 different fiber types. And these 3 fiber types won't necessarily be very visible in every single type of connective tissue, but if you have a fiber that is very visible in a connective tissue, it's going to be one of these 3. We've got collagen, reticular, and elastic fibers. So your collagen fibers, this is the most common type of fiber that you are going to see in our picture here. These big thick pink ones, okay, these big thick pink ones, these are all collagen fibers. You can see we have pointed out a couple of them specifically here. These are long, they're straight, they're unbranched. So this is not really a branch. This is just a bundle, really. So just a couple of them sitting next to each other. But they're not branching off like a tree branch. These protein fibers, in this little cartoon image over here, each collagen fiber is technically 3 different fibers wound together like a rope. And so that's why these are so thick. It's actually 3 different pieces put together. These are flexible, but stronger than steel when pulled from either end. And so that's pretty good. And these form your ligaments and your tendons. Obviously, this is not a ligament or a tendon, okay? So you do find collagen in other tissues, but it is the predominant fiber that you find in your ligaments and tendons. And that strength is really what we need there. Reticular fibers, they're much thinner. They are branched. They do tend to make these networks or these frameworks. Sometimes you'll hear them described as like a web. Okay, it's tough but flexible. Okay, it resists forces from many directions, and it helps stabilize cells and blood vessels. It kind of holds everybody in place. And so here we go. We labeled this over here. All these skinny little ones over here. See how it kind of makes almost a spider web, and we're holding these other cells in place. And then we have elastic fibers. They're branched and wavy. They're very thin, but reticular fibers, they were thin, but these aren't really wavy. Usually elastic fibers are. They're good for stretch and recoil because they contain a protein called elastin. So you can see this is really squiggly. Now, the ones that are labeled up here aren't nearly as wavy, but, excuse me, I can't quite yawn, y'all. The ones that you are most likely to be asked to identify would be very, very visibly wavy. I usually call them black squiggles. Okay, I usually call them black squiggles. Okay, elastic fibers. So we see this is much more wavy here. The collagen fibers were the thick pink ones. And then we didn't point this out on the last slide. Fibroblasts. Most of the cells that you are going to come across in connective tissue are going to be either fibroblasts or chondrocytes. Fibroblasts, as the name kind of implies, they are making those 3 fiber types that we just talked about. Okay, so they're the ones that are physically creating those fibers. Okay, so our first type of connective tissue, we have loose areolar connective tissue. I usually call this one spider webs. Okay, we've got bugs trapped in spider webs. So we do have all 3 of our fiber types. Okay, And then you can see the nucleus of a fibroblast here. I just mentioned the fibroblasts are what are going to make the collagen fibers. It also makes the extracellular matrix. Okay, so extracellular matrix, you can kind of think about it as like a cytoplasm, but instead of the cytoplasm just being inside the cell, the extracellular matrix is the space within the tissue. Okay, this is found surrounding most of your organs and stuff. It just acts like a cushion. Okay, so there's a lot of squishiness, I guess you could say, with this type of tissue, so it makes for good packing material. Now, loose adipose connective tissue. This is your fat. Okay, your adipocytes are your fat cells. Notice how nice and round these are. These little dots. Okay, each one of these has a little dot. That is the nucleus itself. So this is a complete cell. So the white part is the fat droplet within the adipose site itself. Now, here's one thing I want to point out. So I want you to be very clear. This is one complete cell. This is one complete cell. This is not empty space. Okay. Sometimes students will confuse loose adipose with, you got to bear with me, I got to go back a little bit. Like way back. Oh, there we go. Sometimes students will confuse loose adipose with simple squamous. They'll look at this space and see this is kind of round-ish. This is kind of round-ish. Okay. But remember, when we talked about all of these little dots were individual nuclei for individual cells. Okay. And see how a lot of these are not complete circles. Okay, so that's kind of one of the things that you want to look for if you're trying to figure out if it's simple squamous versus the adipose. The adipose, there it goes. Every single one of these is one complete circle. Okay, again, this is not empty space. All right, dense regular connective tissue. I usually just call this one pink waves. Okay, so you will notice that all of these pink things, all right, these are collagen fibers, and you'll notice that they all run in the same direction. They're very symmetrical. You can see these cells over here. These are your fibroblasts that are cranking out those collagen fibers, but notice the symmetry here. There is a reason for that. This is good for strong attachment of body parts in one direction. This is what your tendons and your ligaments are made of. We really should only pull on your tendons or your ligaments in one direction. Okay. Now, I made you a side note. Do not confuse this with smooth muscle tissue. Okay, so when we get to smooth muscle, I'll kind of point that out one more time, but I'll go ahead and I'll show you smooth muscle. Bear with me. All right, smooth muscle. So, smooth muscle also looks symmetrical, and that's okay. But notice that this does not have a wavy appearance. Okay, and the nuclei of smooth muscles look a lot different. Okay, they're much larger, and they're kind of chunky in the middle, and they get skinnier on the ends, and they're very, very visible. If we go back to dense regular, these are kind of easy to see, but if we look at everything down here, we can see that they're there, but they're not very prominent. And again, we've got nice wavy motions here that you don't see in smooth muscle. So try to keep those straight. Dense irregular connective tissue. This is also full of collagen, right? So the pink stuff is still collagen fibers, but now we don't have that nice symmetry, okay? So this is more quote-unquote chaotic looking. These collagen bundles are really just kind of running in every which way, every direction possible. Why are we doing it that way? Because collagen fibers in dense irregular connective tissue are good as strong attachments for body parts, but now we're doing that in different directions. Okay, so you find dense irregular connective tissue in your dermis of your skin. And if you think about, if you just kind of take your arm and kind of move the skin around just a little bit, kind of pinching your arms and things like that. You can do that in multiple directions without breaking your skin. Okay, so bunch of pink mess. Sometimes I call it a pink mess. That's dense irregular connective tissue. All right, dense elastic connective tissue. I warned you that black squiggles were elastic fibers. Okay. We mentioned they're full of that elastin protein. These can stretch up to 1.5 times their length and snap back to their original length. We call that recoil. That's snapping back. That's recoil. You find dense elastic tissue in anything that either vibrates, like your vocal cords, or places like your aorta. Okay, so if we pump extra blood through your aorta, we need to stretch a little bit, but we need to go back to our original shape. Hyaline cartilage. I think this looks like purple eyeballs. Okay, I usually call it purple eyeballs. See, here's your eyeball, here's your eyeball. Now, so cartilages are different. Okay, so make yourself a note. Cartilages are different. Cartilages do not have fibroblasts. Cartilages have chondrocytes. Okay, chondrocytes are for cartilage. In fact, chondro means cartilage. Okay, chondrocytes live in special little houses. They're called lacunae, okay, or lacunae, however you would like to pronounce them. They basically build themselves this little house, and then they just live in it. So each of these little dots inside these eyeballs, those are the little chondrocytes. Okay, and then the rest of the eyeball is the lacuna itself. Okay, so again, chondrocytes are in cartilages, fibroblasts are in the other types of connective tissue. Now, hyaline cartilage is not the only type of cartilage we're going to talk about. We've also got fibrocartilage. Okay, so you can see this isn't nearly as packed closely together as like a dense irregular connective tissue. You also have the chondrocytes within the lacuna again. Okay, so these still kind of look like little eyeballs to me. So those are our two cartilage types. So hyaline cartilage has your eyeballs. Fibrocartilage also has your little eyeballs. All right, chondrocytes within lacuna. Okay, osseous tissue. Okay, this is your bone, but we really like the science word, osseous connective tissue. Do not write compact bone on your exam. It's osseous connective tissue. Students usually don't have a hard time visually identifying osseous tissue. There's really nothing else that you're going to see that looks even remotely close to osseous tissue. That's usually not the problem. They do sometimes forget that they need to know a few extra structures. So on your lab list, you may notice that you need to learn an osteon, which is just one of these big circles. Okay, you'll see that these are all over the place. Each one of these giant circles is an osteon. Okay, you'll notice these. In this case, they're kind of a black appearance. Sometimes they're clear, but these dark circles here, these are central canals. So every osteon has a central canal in the middle. And then you'll see all of these little black dots, these little dark dots. These are osteocytes that also live in lacuna. So we had chondrocytes, and we said chondro meant cartilage. Now we have osteocytes in osseous tissue, okay, and osteo is bone, okay. So keep in mind that we do need to know a couple extra structures for osseous tissue. All right, blood. Again, most students don't have a hard time recognizing blood. There's really nothing else that looks remotely close to it. But don't forget that we do need to know an erythrocyte, a red blood cell, from a leukocyte or a white blood cell versus a thrombocyte or a platelet. Okay, so your red cells, they are almost never as red as you want them to be. in our minds, like we want like fire engine red, and they're usually just not that bright. But here's how you can tell the difference. First of all, you are going to have so many more red blood cells than any other thing in whatever image or slide that you are looking at. Erythrocytes are the predominant cell that you will see. They're also a little bit smaller than the white cells, which are not white. They always stain like a purple or a pinkish color, and that's okay. You usually don't see nearly as many white cells compared to red cells. For the time being, we're not going to ask you to distinguish different types of white cells, so you'll notice that this one does not look the same as this one, because they're not. They are different types of white cells. We're just collectively going to call these leukocytes. Okay, and last but not least, the platelets, these tiny purple dots. Okay, these are the smallest little components that you see, and so they're small and they're a little hard to see, but they're easy to differentiate between a red cell and a white cell.